Welcome to another edition of the Best Bets episode. Coming to you with a huge slate of games this weekend. Saturday really is loaded. Um, probably one of the best slates of college basketball we've had thus far. But not a ton of action, at least as of right now, on our card. Of course, as always, you can stay up to date with the plays that we do have by joining the Discord. That's where we'll post anything if we do happen to get on more stuff as it gets closer. But as of right now, only two lock plays. The first one coming in the SEC, Georgia sitting at plus 11 against Alabama. Georgia reeling a little bit. Alabama playing some really good basketball. Pulled out a fortunate win at Mississippi State last night. Mississippi State missed a layup late. Alabama ended up pulling it out by 4.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll probably end up having more than just these two. Don't really know what we're going to have until the lines officially come out, because some lines come out a lot differently than the projections. So we'll most likely, I would assume, we come up with 4 to 5 for a Saturday slate. But yeah, for this game, Georgia that's just my cutoff line would be 11 here. I believe projections have it at around 12, like on Torvik. So that's where I would play this game too. I think it's kind of a letdown spot for Alabama off that super high emotional win against Mississippi State, and just the run that they've kind of been on lately. They've won a lot of close games, like the game at Kentucky as well. That game could have gone either way. And then obviously the game last night was, probably a little bit fortunate in their favor. But I also think it's kind of a buy low situation with Georgia, and I think they profile a lot better as a dog with their elite defense, their athletic defense. I think it can have a lot of success in this game because Bama lives off attacking the rim and hitting kick out threes, but it's really hard to do that against a Georgia defense that likes to stay at home and has athletic defenders all over the floor, and they can defend this Bama group one on one. And they're 51st nationally in assist rate against, so they're going to kind of they'll limit their amount of rotating that they'll do defensively that leads to those spot up threes for guys like Youngblood and Aiden Holloway. So definitely a schematic advantage for them on the defensive end. And on the offensive end, I think Georgia could potentially live on the glass in this game. They're never going to win games with their shot making, but if they have an advantage in this game, I think it is on the glass. They're 13th nationally in offensive rebound rate compared to Bama just being 177th on the defensive glass and defensive rebound rate, that is. With Georgia, defense turnovers are always a concern, but Bama, they're 343rd nationally in turnover rate defensively with their drop coverage. So Georgia should feel comfortable in this game. Bama will force Georgia to make some shots. And I don't think this is the worst shot making team in the world with their guards, guys like Tyron Lawrence and what's the other
Blue
LaFew,
Cane.
Dakota Blue Cane. Yeah, I don't know if that's a great game for him creating off the bounce, but like Dakota LaFew and Silas Demery, I think it's a competent enough group, but they're going to win this game through the glass with Asa Newell and Cyril and their 4 big rotation that they run out there. So definitely think this team's defensive identity can hang around in this game against a Bama team that could potentially be sleeping a little bit early after just coming off that win on Wednesday.
Yeah. Would you say that maybe a first half play could be a play as well here?
I think, yeah, if you don't trust Georgia like down the stretch of a game, I think you could play it first half. But I do like getting double digits here with a team that has a defensive identity. Like, I don't expect them to go in and win this game just because the late game shot making of Alabama will ultimately probably win them this game. But potentially, like, at least starting your position with Georgia, like plus 11 or better. And then if they happen to get up at this point, like 7 or 8 in this game, or you can happen to get Bama at minus 110 live on the money line, like maybe trying to hit a middle in that situation and just trying to maximize your profit there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Another game coming on Saturday, UConn, who, they had to work a little bit last night to beat DePaul. Should get McNeely back in this one, but playing at Marquette here, not going to be an easy one. They're plus 6, or at least that's where it's projected at.
Yeah, I would play UConn here at +6. It would be dependent on McNeely coming back if I'm only getting 6 here, just because this has to be the bottom of the market on UConn. People, I think it's being a bit overblown, like how bad they're playing. Obviously, like it hasn't been good. Like they were losing to DePaul by what, double digits the other night, and they ended up getting the job done and handled business in the second half. But this UConn team profiles the type of team to give Marquette issues. We've talked about that when I went on my stretch of fading Marquette without success. But I still am going to live by this is the type of team that can give them issues. UConn takes care of the ball at an elite level. They're top 50 in turnover rate on the offensive end. They shoot the ball extremely well. Marquette's going to give up spot up opportunities, and UConn will have shooters all over the floor, especially if McNeely's playing, and they get all over the offensive glass with Taurus Reed at the center position. They're top 100 nationally in offensive rebound rate. So their offense definitely grades out as the type of offense to give them problems. And on the defensive side, they don't defend the arc well from like a percentage standpoint, but they're really good at running shooters off the line and staying connected. They don't allow spot up threes. Like Marquette loves to shoot the three ball, and they aren't really that great of a shooting team. They've kind of regressed in that area since conference play started. But yeah, UConn, they're giving up like 38% from three this year, but it's just the amount of volume, like the lack of volume that Marquette's going to get in this game, I think gives UConn an advantage. And everyone knows like UConn, they've had foul issues this year, and they're fouling in like close. I think they're still outside the top 300 in defensive foul rate on the bad end of it. But Marquette, they don't draw fouls really ever. They're 330th nationally in foul rate on the offensive end. So I don't really think that's going to turn into much of a problem for UConn. So I think the defense sets up pretty well. And the fact that they're not going to be overwhelmed athletically, that's been another issue for this UConn defense. They don't have that same perimeter athleticism that they had with their two national championship teams. So I think that's another feather in their cap there. And like I said, I would like 6.5 or 7 if McNeely doesn't play. But with him in, I would play this at 6.
Yeah, UConn hasn't really played a very good stretch of basketball. You know, they've won some games, but you know, without him, they've struggled a little bit. And so, hopefully, if he does come back Saturday, this is a spot where they can get back to playing some better basketball. But I think we're starting to see that, you know, this UConn team, that fluke that we thought we saw in Maui wasn't really much of a fluke, because they're just not that good.
Yeah, no. And they've lost a lot of close games too in conference. I don't think they've been blown out in any of their games. I think they were all like one possession games, if I'm not mistaken. Like the last game against Xavier, super tight. You know, they lost to Villanova on the Caravan, 2 missed free throws. Like you could view their season a little bit differently with how tight these games have been. And if I'm getting 6 against this Marquette team that I don't think profiles all that well to blow out UConn, I think it's just an advantage in our favor.
Yeah, and also like playing at Marquette, this is a school that really I feel like should have an on-campus arena. It's really too bad that they play at the Bucks Arena, because like they don't fill that place, and so it doesn't have quite the same atmosphere as, you know, maybe some other schools have, or what you could get on campus at Marquette. So not like they're going into like a gauntlet of a place to go play.
Yeah, they played on, I believe it was their gym on campus a couple times like early in the season. They had like a little like tournament there early in the year, and the environment was pretty sweet. I think they played like George Mason there, and the environment was pretty awesome.
Yeah. So those are the 2 plays that we have for the weekend. But obviously still a lot of other great games. As I said at the top of the show, there's, you know, no shortage of great games this weekend, rivalry games. And speaking of rivalry games, we have the first of 2 this year, a little bit different, right? This might be the biggest spread we've ever seen in a Duke Carolina game. Came in at 13.5 on FanDuel. Torvik projects it at 16. which just doesn't even seem possible in a Duke Carolina game because you're always counting, no matter how good or bad each team is, you're always planning on this game being a close one. So it just doesn't seem possible. This is a game that it's hard for me to argue for either side because this game is always close, and so saying oh, you should take UNC feels very square. But Duke is obviously playing phenomenal basketball there, and UNC is not. And so, you look at it that way, and it's like, okay, you should probably be on Duke. So, for me, it's like I'm just going to sit back and enjoy this game. I don't know how you feel, Cody, but it's just a very, very tough one to pick for this year.
Yeah, and like you said, like the line should be higher than 13.5. Like this should be probably where Torvik has this projected. Like UNC hasn't shown us anything to say that they can really compete in this game. Like we saw this, I don't know if we saw this exact same situation a couple of years ago or the UNC, I believe that was the UNC Final Four team that went into Duke as like a 10, 11 point dog and beat them outright. So I don't think it's that kind of situation that we're getting here, just because I think Duke schematically I think it's a really good setup for them in this game with their rim denial and transition denial defense. And that's where UNC lives. Like they don't have enough shooting to get over the top of this Duke defense that is also elite defending the 3-point line. Like there's really no weaknesses in their game. I think the only knock you can have against this defense right now is like not having Malik Brown, and you have to play more Cayman Maluach, and I hope he's playing because last time we saw him on the floor, he was throwing up all over the floor. It was a really weird situation, a really weird game at Duke the other day. But that kind of changes how Duke has to defend. They have to play mostly drop coverage, and they have to play Ngangba off the bench, and he's not nearly the same defensive presence that Malik Brown is, and because Brown's probably their best defender. But I do think this Duke defense is so elite at the rim regardless that I think it's going to give UNC some real trouble in this game.
Yeah. That's the side that feels right being on Duke, but at the same time, you just never know. This game just means so much more than than what these two teams have talent wise. So should be fun as always. Regardless, the atmosphere will be awesome. Should be a fun game. Another big game on Saturday, Florida at Tennessee. For those of you that remember, early in the SEC season here, Florida hosted Tennessee, whooped them 73-43. Tennessee, I don't think they didn't make their 10th field goal of the game until less than like 3 minutes left in the game. It was just an absolute beatdown. In this game here, Tennessee actually projects as 2-point favorites. Some spots maybe 2.5, but they're going to be favored in this game, and I expect them to come out here quite hungry. They're coming off a tough loss at home, where they were double-digit favorites against the Kentucky team earlier in the week. That was without Lamont Butler. Here they are now at home in a spot where they lost to this Florida team, as I said, by 30 at the beginning of January. So they're going to be highly, highly motivated for this game. And I just like the spot here. I think this is a get-right game for them in a way, where they spin it back on Florida and even their season series with them.
Yeah, I mean, the spot screams Tennessee. Like, you can't really find a much better spot. Like, you're coming off of a home loss against Kentucky as a double-digit favorite, and now you're playing a team that's coming in that beat you by 30, basically to open SEC play, I believe. But schematically, I hate it for Tennessee. I don't think this offense is nearly good enough. It's your classic Rick Barnes offense within the last 5 seasons. They just don't have the ceiling I don't think they have the ceiling to go anywhere special really this year, as it's always been the issue with Rick Barnes. But in this matchup, like, they can take away Chaz Lanier, and Chaz Lanier is basically their entire half-court offense, running him off screens, just trying to get him open looks from 3. Florida has really good perimeter defenders that can chase him around all night. Expect Elijah Martin to just be in his shorts the entire game and really give him some problems, just like they did in Gainesville. So I don't really love the situation. It's going to come down to Sakai Ziegler and Igor Milicic trying to create offense off the bounce, and it's hasn't been a good proposition. It hasn't been great throughout the entirety of conference play, and that's why they're sitting at 4-4 in the league right now. And I think Florida can create a ton of offensive value for them, even against one of the best defenses in the country in Tennessee. They got all over the glass against Tennessee in the first matchup. Obviously, Tennessee is going to take a little more pride in that area, but they could just be outmatched in the front court. And Florida has 4 or 5 bigs that they can run out there and just crash the glass relentlessly. And I think that's a really good way to create value against this Tennessee defense that is really good with their first shot defense. They're an elite perimeter defense. They're an elite rim defense. But if you're giving up second chances or if you're getting second chances, if you're Florida, I think it gives you a really good chance to win. If this line's inflated, like say you get a little spot tax, it opens up at 3.5 or 4, people push it up to 5.5. I think you might end up seeing me on Florida just because I think the matchup is like very much in Florida's favor.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I would be pretty surprised if it got that high, but you never know with people and like betting the spot.
The spot tax, especially this year, is insane, and I've seen it every week. Like people throwing out, "Oh, this is the spot of the week," and like the lines get pushed 2.5 to 3 points, and like I think you could honestly be more profitable by waiting out those spots and betting it the other way around tip off. I think this could be a situation where you do that, but I think this is a pretty strong spot for Tennessee to get right. Like it just doesn't feel right for them to sit at 4-5 in conference play if they end up losing this game. Like this team's still really, really good, and they're a top 5 team in this league. But I just hate the matchup for them right now.
Yeah, for sure. So a few other games we're going to quickly rattle off here to wrap up the episode. First one, Washington +4 at Minnesota.
Yeah, this is one that you'll probably end up seeing me play. Kind of just waiting on the number. And I think a lot of places have this. I think projections for Torvik have this close to 5.5. If I get a 5.5, it's definitely going to be played. Washington saw Frank Kepnong come back into the lineup against UCLA, and it helped their defense tremendously. They held UCLA down inside the arc with a lot of success, even with Adai Mara playing more minutes for UCLA. The interior defense saw a major boost with Kepnong in the lineup, and it helps Danny Sprinkle's defensive scheme tremendously. They try to run guys off the 3-point line and force teams at the rim, but they never really had that rim protector until now. They have Frank Kepnong. He's freakishly athletic defender, was really good at Oregon, and he's dealt with some injuries throughout his career, and he's dealt with injuries this season as well. And he finally came back, and I think he means a lot for this defense. And I think you're kind of seeing the point where Minnesota is being a little bit overvalued off of this run that they've been on. You can poke some holes in their in the resume that they have right now, especially in their last 5. Like beating Michigan. Honestly, beating Michigan hasn't really aged well. Michigan has not played well recently. Like their last 5 games, they've looked pretty bad.
Yeah.
And then there's a few other kept it close with Ohio State. Honestly, that game's kind of aging well at this point. And then beating Oregon, like I just don't really think that's a fantastic win, beating Oregon at home. So I think you can poke some holes in what they've done recently. And Washington, I think, is undervalued with Kepnong coming back in the lineup.
Yeah. And to your point about Michigan, they're struggling. They're starting to work themselves like to the bubble if they're not careful. So
they don't really have any great wins, do they? Like a couple, like at Wisconsin's a good win, at UCLA is a good win. Besides that, they've lost like a lot of really close games against good competition, not like elite competition. Got blown out by Purdue, and then lost to Wake Forest early in the year, which isn't really. It's not necessarily a great loss. So
yeah, no. Next one we have UCF BYU. UCF coming off a tight loss at Kansas. BYU had an overtime win against Baylor earlier in the week. That was a really fun game, actually. Rob Wright was awesome down the stretch for Baylor, forcing overtime, and then BYU ended up getting it done in overtime. This one looks like it's going to be UCF getting 2 points here, +2 at home against BYU.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm considering. It's kind of a fate of BYU on the road. They don't really have any good road performances this year. Like losing at Providence by 20 early in the year, losing at Utah, albeit it's a rivalry game, but Utah has not really played good basketball at all. There's a couple other road losses in there. I don't think they were great, but yeah, I mean UCF, I think their offense can kind of expose BYU's like lack of perimeter defense. They just don't have the greatest lateral quickness out there. And I think, I mean, this UCF team is now more of an offensive centric team. And I think they can have a lot of advantages here, especially breaking down this defense and hitting some catch and shoot threes. Guys like Darius Johnson and Keyshawn Hall getting into the lane and giving these UCF shooters some kick out threes, I think is going to be a big advantage. And just a motivational spot coming back home and like they're starting to trend up, especially on the offensive end. They put up was it 87 points on Kansas is it's a really positive outcome
after scoring
so,
48 against them earlier this month. So
yeah, I mean, I think the offense is trending upward. Obviously, the defense has been a little bit concerning, but I think they can defend this team on the perimeter well enough in a motivated home spot to take down BYU, who's really struggled on the road this year. It's not official right now. It could end up being official if the line comes out a little bit higher than this.
Yeah. Next one, we have probably the least talked about good team in the country, Michigan State, +4 against USC, or they're -4 against USC. Sorry, USC +4.
Yeah, the area I'm looking at is USC at home getting 4. I think we kind of have to be looking at the peak of the market for Michigan State right now. They've been great, and they do actually profile as a team that can have success anywhere they play with their dominant rim game and their ability to rebound on both sides. But mostly just a number spot, and I think USC's physicality and athleticism at all 5 positions can potentially give Michigan State issues with they don't really have like a lot of great one-on-one scorers, and I think USC could kind of expose them by, forcing them into isolation. And I think USC can also do a pretty solid job of keeping Michigan State off the glass on the defensive side. So that's just the area that I'm looking. Not sure if it's going to be a play because I love this Michigan State team. It just feels like this is definitely their ceiling right now. They're sitting at like the low teens and on Ken Palm and Torvik right now. And I just don't really see their ceiling being in the top 5 without having a truly elite shot maker or any sort of shot making on the floor. Like Jaden Akins has been not great this year, and he's probably their best shooter. It's just I think their ceiling's kind of capped, and I don't really know how much further this team can go.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right on Michigan State in terms of like, they're definitely at their peak. They're not truly a top 5 team in this country. They're a really good team that's really balanced and well coached, obviously with a lot of good pieces around, but they don't have a go-to guy. Like I'm a little bit worried come March, like they're going to be steady. I feel like they're a team where their floor is high. I'm not so sure about their ceiling just because they don't have a guy, like they don't have a dude that can just go get them something whenever they need it. Just worries me a little bit depending on matchups.
Yeah, I just don't think they can go up against a top tier team and beat them. It's just we've seen it this year. They lost to Kansas early in the year, and I thought they played really well against Kansas and just weren't able to get over the hump. They had a few Memphis, their talent kind of won out against them as well. And they probably should have lost to Illinois. Like Yakachonis only played 9 minutes in that game. And I think his shot making probably would have got them over the hump on the road. But what's keeping me off this is the fact that they can kind of beat up on inferior teams with their rim dominance and rebounding. So ultimately, I probably won't be on that. But if I was like super high volume, like this would definitely be the side I would be on with USC getting the points.
Yeah. Next one, Texas Tech +12 against Houston.
Yeah, I mean, I hate fading Houston, so I'm not completely sure if I'm going to get there with this. Like, was on BYU on the road at Houston early in the year, and they got absolutely murdered. I think it was like a 35-point loss or something like that. But Texas Tech, obviously a far better team, and I think they match up extremely well in this matchup. I think first off, I mean, I think the shooting and their ball security for Texas Tech can give Houston's defense some problems. They have a ton of shooting. They have Chance McMillan, like Kerwin Walton, Christian Anderson as well, and they have Elijah Hawkins to kind of distribute the entire offense. And I think it can lead to a ton of spot up threes against a Houston team that gives that up a ton. And the fact that, yeah, like I said, the fact that they can take care of the ball against this Houston defense that is going to be motivated as they always are. I think they're allergic to these kind of sleepy situations because Kelvin Sampson just really won't allow it. But they're coming off like a really high emotional stretch of basketball. You know, that Kansas win was an insane win and just a super high emotional game. And then you go to West Virginia in a hostile environment and end up pulling that game off as well with a really good performance. But I think this Texas Tech team matches up super well. I think they can get on the offensive glass as well. Tech had to play two bigs because Darian Williams wasn't in the lineup, but I think that actually kind of helps them out here with JT Toppin and Federico getting all over the offensive glass. They're two of the better offensive rebounders in the entire country, and I think they can create value there. And kind of have to monitor the Emmanuel Sharp situation again. He's really banged up right now with that ankle injury. Only played 18 minutes against West Virginia. And even if he does play in this situation, it doesn't seem like he's 100%. And they probably would be smarter to sit him out, but college teams don't really like to sit guys out and give them rest. They think every game is extremely important, but he hasn't looked 100%. He hasn't really played all that well when he's been out on the floor. So, and he's huge for their shooting as well. Like their shooting drops off pretty significantly when he's not on the floor. So the side I would look at here is Texas Tech getting the points. If I play this, I'll probably end up being small just because fading Houston, especially when they're at home, is a pretty scary proposition. But this is a situation where if Tech, it's kind of a similar situation to the Georgia game that we talked about earlier, is I'm not going to say play in first half just because Houston is typically so dominant in their first halves. But if they get up early in this game, if Tech gets up early in this game, I think you could look at potentially buying Houston on the money line and kind of getting a middle situation there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next one, we have Villanova -1 hosting Creighton. Creighton's quietly been pretty good. Now won 6 in a row, sitting at 15-6 after an uneven start to their season. Villanova reeling a little bit, lost 2 in a row, now 5-5 in the Big East. So this is a big spot for them to pick up a quality one.
Yeah, mostly just the spot play here, and because I think Villanova played really well on the road at Creighton. It was Creighton's shot making that ended up winning that game for them. They shot I believe it was 14 for 25 from three, and Villanova's offense was actually really good in that game. They turned the ball over only one time in that entire game, and they were able to generate some really efficient offense led by Eric Dixon. I think he's a real matchup problem in this game. But yeah, it's also more of a buy low, sell high situation with Creighton riding so high right now. I'm not really sure where their ceiling is completely either. Although they're playing really good ball right now. They're a super well balanced team with a high floor. You know, the defense is always going to be great with Kalkbrenner in the middle. I just kind of concerned to where the offense is. I mean, I think they've been running a little bit hot, not lucky, but I think they're probably due for a little bit of regression on the offensive side. And I think Villanova's offense is led by Dixon is enough to exploit this Creighton defense. I don't think they didn't put Kalkbrenner on Dixon in the first game. I wouldn't be surprised if they did it here, but I think he could be a matchup problem by stretching out Kalkbrenner away from the rim, and that can create a lot more opportunities for Villanova.
Yeah, I like Villanova in that spot. Now the last one, Oklahoma State, Utah. A couple of not great teams here, especially Oklahoma State, who got walloped this week. Oklahoma State -1.5 against Utah.
Yeah, mostly just a situation where they can kind of get right at home, if that's even possible with this team. I think Utah's been pretty horrific too, albeit the ultimate get right game is when you get to play Cincinnati at home. Like Cincinnati has just been an absolute disaster. We can talk about them on a different pod later on. But I think Oklahoma State, they can turn over Utah and they can really speed up Utah as well. I just don't think Utah's handlers are good enough against this Oklahoma State pressure. And Oklahoma State can keep Utah off the glass, which it's always where Craig Smith, his teams like to generate their value with their possessional size, getting all over the offensive glass and trying to control their defense through the defensive glass. But I do think Oklahoma's pace and their ability to force turnovers to generate a faster paced game, I think gives them a really good chance to win this game. Along with, I do think this number is probably a little bit short. I'd have these teams fairly close to equal, despite how bad Oklahoma State's been. So I think this line should be closer to 2.5 to 3. And with the spot, I think this is definitely an Oklahoma State spot. I think I'm going to definitely consider this at 1.5 and might even play this up to 3.
Yeah. Well, like I said, beginning of the episode, another huge weekend of games, bunch of games that are really good that we didn't even get to talk about, that we don't have action on, like Kansas, Baylor, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Auburn at Ole Miss, which I think is an interesting one. Just a loaded slate. Vanderbilt's going at Oklahoma. South Carolina maybe picks up their first SEC win.
Yeah, I know you had something on that, right? On South Carolina.
I just have it's more of a gut feeling. As much as it's been talked about how South Carolina hasn't won an SEC game yet, it just feels like it's time. It's going to be a late night. I think it's an 8 p.m. tip or 8:30 at South Carolina, Texas A&M, traveling there. I think South Carolina is 0-9, 0-8 in the SEC. So this is more just about the spot. I think this could be a spot where South Carolina actually does pick up their first SEC win. They're at home, going to be a good crowd. They're motivated because they haven't won one yet, trying to play spoiler on someone else's season. I think that the spot could be right. So if you have a few extra bucks and maybe want to sprinkle them into a parlay on the money line or something and have a little fun, I wouldn't be shocked at all if that game went to the Gamecocks.
Yeah, and I actually think the matchup kind of favors them. Plus, South Carolina's starting to get healthy finally. They got Jamari Thomas back just a couple games ago, and he's pretty crucial for them for a team that really lacks guard depth. And South Carolina's pretty good on the defensive glass. So if anybody's going to keep them off, if anybody's going to keep A&M off the offensive glass, it's South Carolina's probably one of the teams in this league that can do it. So at home, they don't have a win yet. Texas A&M could throw up a 1 of 23-point shooting night, and South Carolina could win this game outright.
Wade Taylor could do that himself. So
he could. But the thing is, he could shoot, 2 for 15 in this game, and A&M could just grab 25 offensive rebounds against anybody, and they find a way to get it done. But obviously gives him a worse chance with him throwing up a game like that. But yeah, it's actually not a bad spot for South Carolina. They can shoot over the top of the A&M defense too. So it's actually something that I will consider. I haven't completely gone through the entire card yet, but just make sure to stay tuned on the Discord and when plays are released on Twitter as well. So yeah, definitely something I'm considering.
Yeah. I wish we could talk about all the games. I know there's probably some out there that you guys are wondering about, so don't hesitate to put something in the Discord or message us on Instagram or something if you're curious about anything. But with that, hope you guys enjoy the games this weekend. Should be a great weekend of games, and look forward to recapping after the weekend. And hopefully it's a green weekend for everyone out there. So we'll talk to you in the next episode.